It's Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast. And today I'm really excited to have Hansel Lynn on with me. And he was referred to me by Franchise Elevator. So thank you. And it was really helpful because often I try to handpick, people get referred by people on the show. I love that. And then sometimes there'll be folks that listen to it and go, "Ooh, I think this leader would be really good connection." And so as I read your description, Hansel, about the work you do, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I want to hear more about it. So I'm pretty sure other people do too. So welcome.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks so much for having me, Heather. I'm excited to be on the show.
So where are you right now anyway in your leadership journey? Tell everybody about that.
Yeah, of course. I love the way that you asked this question because it's such a it's like an intimate question, right? Everybody sort of takes it in a different way. So in terms of where I am, so let me just start by telling you a bit more about what I do, and that kind of segues into my answer to the leadership journey. So what I do, so I'm a founder and the CEO of a business called theCoderSchool, and what we do is we teach kids to code. If you think about this, this podcast that we're doing, if you think about, I don't know, Google Maps or blockchain, AI, buzzwords, whatever, all the stuff out there, it's all based on technology, right? And so our whole thing is we want to teach more kids to code so they can get ready for all this crazy technology that's coming our way. So that's what we do. And the way we do it is we are a franchise. And so we're a franchise system, which means, of course, we have individuals out there who run their own schools using the playbook that we created. They run their own schools to teach, their own community set of kids to code. And so in addition to my own small team as a franchisor, I'm sort of also leading them as my, extended team, extended family, so to speak, as part of this sort of leadership journey. And so that kind of leads me to, I guess, the answer that I thought of when you asked the question of leadership journey. Where am I on this leadership journey? I guess I'm fortunate to be able to say that I'm exactly where I want to be. That's kind of my cop-out non-answer answer. And what I mean by that, so there's two reasons why I'm where I want to be. The first is because we are a franchise. It's the way I lead these guys it fits my personality so much better. I don't see myself as like a natural born leader. That's sort of not who I am. As a tech guy, I'm a builder. I'm sort of a creator. I'm a supporter and helper. And so I don't see myself as a natural born leader. And in this franchise world, that's kind of the way that I feel like the leadership works best is what I do is instead of, hey, everybody gather around and let's do this. I do more of, hey, what do you need? Let me make a tool for you there. What do you need here? I'm going to make a program. Let's see if that brings up more kids. So it's a different style of leadership, I think. And it's something that I'm much more comfortable with that sort of fits me much better. And the second reason is that I'm fortunate in that I don't have any investors. And so I don't have people coming at me saying, hey, where's my profit? How fast are you going to grow? And, go. And so what that allows me to do is that gives me the freedom to make decisions based a little bit more on my franchisees and my team. And I don't have to always be thinking, hey, where I get the money next? Let me, my philosophy has become much more, hey, let me help you guys out. And even if that's at the expense of me, in the long term, that makes us all stronger, as a team.
It sounds a lot like me. So my definition of caring leadership or leadership with heart is really showing concern and kindness towards those who look to you for guidance. And so that concern and kindness, that component of that you talk to of being supportive, is a huge element of that. So it's like, even though you don't think you're like the whole natural born, I think that those archetypes of like natural born this and that are just hogwash anyway. I do think there are different people. I call caring leadership having art and science combined. And so there's like this, everybody has their own unique brushstrokes, and we show it in different ways. There might be very specific things that really land for people to make them feel like they're valued and cared for and things, but how we do it individually, like how you do it, which is like, I'm not going to say, come here, everybody gather around, and we're going to do it. Instead, it's like, what do you need from me? Let me give it to you. That's supportive, caring leadership. So voila, Hansel, there you go. Like you're already there.
Awesome. Good to know. I never knew it.
Yeah, it's
until
awesome.
You said it.
So I'm curious to know how would, so now the small team that you have, maybe even the franchisees, like how would they define your unique leadership style? How would they say or describe you as a leader?
I think very approachable. My leadership style is very much I almost try to be a peer with a lot of my folks, and I find that it's a double-edged sword, right? It doesn't work for everybody. I find that it does make the relationship more interesting. People tend to open up more. You tend to be more like on a friendly level, which is who I am and how I like to do it. On the other hand, I've also noticed that sometimes you lose a bit of authority. You don't seem like the leader in the room. You seem like one of the peers, one of the friends, right? And so I have to sort of use it at the right times. There are times when I just have to be like, hey, I just have to make the decision. Sorry, this is the way it's got to be. Otherwise, then I'm not a leader at all, right? So it's a little bit tougher. And every time I do something like, let's say I give somebody an exception, hey, you can do this, it's against the rules a little bit, but I'll let you do it because I want to have that relationship and whatnot. In the back of my mind, I always think, okay, if I do this, I know I'm kind of gonna mess myself up later. Somebody's gonna call me out on it, or maybe it's the wrong decision or whatever. But in the end, I just said, well, listen, that's just the way I decided to lead this company. I want to try to help these franchisees, and if that ends up, messing me up later, let me try to clean up the pieces. Thank goodness it hasn't really impacted me too negatively. But that's kind of who I am.
I love that. So I'm curious to know kind of where your drive to lead comes from. I mean, because even though you're like, I don't consider myself a leader, in the end, you created this thing. So, do you think that stems from someplace? Where does it start from? Where did that drive to lead come from?
Yeah, well, wow, that's man. I got to look back to my deep past here. Think about how I grew up and all this stuff. No, I don't know. I think part of it certainly. I think you hear this a lot. Is part of what drives me sort of more in the current term. Is part of what drives me is just helping people, right? So when I have franchisees that come to me and say, hey, this is the CoderSchool is the best decision I've ever made, or I'm living my dream because of the CoderSchool. I actually had somebody just this morning tell me they won the 40 under 40 award, in her area because of the CoderSchool. So things like those in the sort of the current near term, those are the things that I think really drive me to do it more. I'm like, hey, yeah, that work, is awesome. But I think sort of in my past, interestingly, I was thinking about this more. I don't know if it's the rebel in me, but there's some things that like, it's just, I live in Silicon Valley. It's very money. Everybody, when I first started, everybody's like, oh, how much money are you going to raise? What's your exit strategy? And go. And I just thought, that doesn't sound right. And, and my brother, he's like a big corporate guy. He's a CEO of a big company, and he's always been about the money. And maybe it's just part of me, because when you asked that question, I thought, is there something, in my past that made me more like this? And it may be that. It may be just like seeing the stuff around me thinking, hey, doesn't sound right. Let me see if I can make something that's more geared toward the people and not as much towards just making money.
Love that so much. Everybody hear me. It's like an amen school right now. I want to be like, hey, amen. That was really good. Because as we think about carrying leadership and think about leadership heart, it doesn't mean that the results can't be connected to the heart. So like you have the heart, you have the care, and then you have the end result. You're a thriving franchise right now. And it's based on your own pace and about your own needs and based aligned with your own values and your own vision. And unhampered by all these other limitations that can be placed on you based upon the outside things you talked about before. And so I think that the fact that you consider you're considering kind of that counterbalance, and even like what you talked about as a leader, it's like, yes, I want to be supportive, and yes, I want to be like a team member, but at some point I have to kind of draw the line and make the decision. And I think carrying leaders, it's a journey. This is not a destination. None of us are perfect on it. And so as you describe it, it's like, yeah, I mean, it's your unique way. Like I said, it's your unique brushstrokes to what it is you have going on. And I think that's really, really inspiring to hear someone like you say that.
And Heather, actually, just preparing for this podcast and just like thinking about some of the stuff that you're going to ask, it really made me think of some of the stuff that you're saying right now. And it's awesome. It helped me learn just by preparing for this podcast that, everybody does things their own way. There's so much pressure out there to do things in another way. And if it's not you, maybe that's not the right thing to do, right? You got to be true to yourself. So I appreciate you having me on this podcast, first of all, but second of all, just making me think about these things. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah. It's so funny because people said many, many times they come off the show and they're like, I feel like that was a therapy session.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah. How much do you bill?
I don't intend exactly. Yeah. I'll bill you afterward. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. So, okay. So now we're at the time of the part of the podcast where I want you to share a time when maybe, maybe your values weren't, and your kind of the values weren't as aligned, and you were kind of imbalanced, and you felt like, well, this is less me, this would be more me, but I'm leading this way. And what did it look like? Maybe you weren't showing as much care, you weren't leading with heart as much. What did it look like specifically, like in a story? And then what did you do to come out of it, like on the other end, to just become more enlightened? I don't mean perfect, I mean more enlightened. Like, okay, now I have a trigger in my brain that says, don't go there again. Let me go do something else differently.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let me see. So I think probably I'd probably say it is it's in reaction to sort of, again, the pressure, I think, from so when I first started, as I said, what we do is we teach kids to code. And in our situation, we in our model, our philosophy is we teach kids in a very custom way. So there's only two kids and one instructor, and we teach each kid differently because kids are all different, right? They learn differently, different speeds and all that stuff. And so that's kind of the pitch of our school. When I first started this, I've always known that was, to me, the best way to teach somebody, right? Just give them tons of attention. And when I started this, there were a lot of people that said, "Hey, Hansel, the way you do this is you got to make everything repeatable. You got to make a repeatable process. You have to have a curriculum for every kid. Every kid goes through the same thing, do a software, whatever it is, because that way you can just write it once and then a million kids come through and you make a ton of money." And I just remember thinking that's probably not the right way to do it, but okay, let me give it a shot. Everybody's saying to do it, right? So, one of the things that we did that try to quantify things, right, which we don't really love. One of the things we did is we tried to quantify kids. So we said, "Hey, kids, when you can code this kind of application, you're a level 4. When you can code that kind, you're a level 5, right?" And so you kind of give a number because parents all love numbers. And so we actually tried this thing where we actually rated kids. It was just so funny. Like when we did it, so many kids came out of there. Like at first it was like, "Oh yeah, I want to get from a 5 to a 6. How do I do that?" And then after a while, though, all the politics started coming into play. So then a parent comes in and goes, "Hey, wait a minute. My daughter's best friend, I know, is not as smart as my daughter, but they're a higher level than my daughter. So what's going on? Like, what are you doing with this rating system?" And so that became this weird competitive thing where parents wanted us to justify everybody's level, and kids were like, "I need to be the next level." And then we just realized that number has nothing to do with anything. You're not learning. We're just putting an arbitrary number on you. So let's just throw that whole thing away and let's just learn how to code. I don't care what level you are. Let's just code something awesome and then code something more awesome after that. So we've been much more on that track now. It's more, I guess, touchy-feely, less quantifiable, because life can't be quantified. You learn stuff, but you don't have to quantify yourself.
So I'm curious how, like, the parents and then the kids responded to that change. Like, how, when you did that, were there differences in how they responded? What did they say about it?
You mean after we pulled it away, or when we first implemented?
After you pulled it away.
Well, so like everything else, right? It's one of those things you pulled off the Band-Aid kind of thing, right? So in the beginning, it's like, wait a minute, I was aiming for the level 6 or whatever, and then you just kind of, yeah, sorry, and then you just kind of just try to change the subject and let it fade away. But certainly in the beginning, there's a little bit of pushback. It was just, for me, it was the right decision for us in our philosophy. So we just had to do it. We just had to pull it back.
Interesting. I the work we do at Employee Fanatics, my consulting firm, is helping create cultures of listening. And often, almost everything I do, I start with listening. So I mean, like, what I mean by that is, like, I'll ask opinions. Okay. So before I make a change, I may say, "This is something I'm thinking about. So what do you think?" To, like, maybe the team members, maybe or not the customers, it depends. Then I may, like, for example, this next book that we have coming out, it's like, "Okay, what do you think about the title?" To, like, everybody who follows me. Then I get them to vote. Then I'm like, "Oh," because they're gonna be the one who's gonna buy it. Then I get to the book, that it's like, "Oh, here's some book cover options. What do you think?" And then I get everybody to give me, like, again, they vote, and then I choose the majority rules kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's kind of that same thing I do internally. And so I was thinking about that as you're talking about a leader who's, there's a concept first that you said, that, hey, a leader, like, you're not a leader if you're not making decisions. Like, at some point you have to make a decision.
Right.
Even though you might, have that rapport with colleagues or with the team members or whatever it is, you have to make a decision. And then this point where you had this new thing, And I'm not sure if you included or if like where that came from. Like if you just thought about the ranking system, was it just you and your leadership team? Did you include any of the franchisees in the discussion? I don't know how that happened, but I think about Chuck Runyon. He's one of the people I interviewed, and he is, I don't know if you know, ever heard of them, but they're self-esteem brands. They did like Anytime Fitness. So they have like 5,000 franchise locations. And so he talked about doing making this change at this franchise conference, and it was a change that affected a lot of people, but he didn't ask any of the franchisees. I thought that was kind of interesting. And again, it's a much bigger organization. They're like on lots of continents, and they're, you know, but he said like he couldn't have been that successful. So what basically he realized is he was on the stage, he sees the energy shift as he's rolling out this new initiative. He sees these large franchisees come up to him after the conference saying, "Oh yeah, no, I am not supporting this thing. You did this new initiative. You did not ask our opinions." So he and his co-founder had to kind of like stop, retool, include more large franchisees to get them on board, or else they weren't going to support it. He need their support. So I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious how that works. Like in this case where you had this new thing, I don't even know how many locations you had at that, or you know, how many franchises you had at that point. And how did you do? Did you use any kind of listening strategies, at least on the front end with the franchisees, or the back end, or how that worked?
So it was definitely when we were smaller, but the franchisees, it's funny because I actually have that same fight with a lot of the franchisees currently. And when I say fight, I mean, you know, like brotherly fight, right? So like there's a lot of push of let's quantify, because I think that's just human nature. And I'm always pushed back, hey, we're not going to do that. So at the time, I think a lot of them agreed. We didn't do a formal vote like you're alluding to. But I think they agreed with it both ways. They saw us when we implemented, they were like, hey, that's a good idea. And then when we saw it kind of fall apart, they're like, okay, I see why. But you bring up an interesting thing though, because I do that voting thing a lot on my side as well for different things. You know, how we spend this money or whatnot. I'm curious though, like sometimes when I see the vote up, I'm like, oh, I hope that they're going to vote for this other one that I want to vote for, right? And then when they don't, I'm like, should I override that or should I just let it lie?
It's so true, because sometimes you have to, I think you're right with that going back to that idea of like, you have to let your gut tell you. Because so what often happens is we have more information than they have. So we're giving them the ability to vote or to input with limited view into all the bigger picture. But we know the bigger picture. So as we give it to them, we're like, oh, this is great. But then they don't know them unless we explain to them during the first parts of the vote, that there's kind of like this longer strategy that's looking in line. So then, okay, now that I know that, now let me vote versus what do you think? But they don't know like that, right? They have to know the kind of context for the purpose of voting and then what the down the line goals. And I would have some people say, well, I'd like to give you the answer to this, but I would need to know if you are, you know, I get some people who are that way. They're very strategic. I need to know why this and that before I can answer you. But not always, but a very few of them, I'll see they'll do that. And so I was curious to know if that was the case, because hearing from Chuck on that was kind of interesting. Okay, well, so now we're here in the part of the podcast where you have to ask me a question, where you turn the tables and now you're the host and I have to answer you.
All right. Okay, well, let me see. Do you want like a hard one? Whatever.
You give me what you got and I'll do my best.
Okay. All right. So since I am in the ed tech field, so teaching kids to code. So I'll ask you this. So you're a woman of color. And so in the STEM kind of coding field, my understanding is the research I see, even just women is something around 20 or 30% of the field. I saw something that said women of color are more like 5 to 10%.
Yeah.
So much lower.
Yeah.
And I know this is completely out of the blue, and this isn't like your field or whatever. That's okay. But I'm totally curious, like something like that. Do you think that's like what is your gut feeling on why that is? Is it a biological thing? Do you think it's an environmental thing? Or
I think it's access and awareness. So I think like early on, if there's no awareness that this area exists for people of color, and then there's no access to either getting to the coding schools or access to funds to get into no scholarships or something like that to get in, and then no open invitation to get there. I've often found that to be the case. So it's like with anything, whether it's this market or kind of any market, when you see the percentage and the number lower, more often than not, there's a lack of awareness. Or I'm going to give you an example of this too. So I have a son who's doing caddying. He's in a caddy program. I would have never known about that, but someone at our church who happened to be not black, a white person, who actually said, oh, her son is in this particular caddy program and is at this very wealthy country club. We would have never known it, but so if we did know, we would have the access. If we didn't know, we wouldn't. So how would we even know to get there? So how would we get to your coding school if we didn't know it existed? If we didn't even know coding was even an option? Then if we didn't even know, like we couldn't get there because let's say maybe transportation is limited, maybe our distance from where your school's at is limited. So how would I get there? Then even if I get there, how can I afford to pay for it? So there's all those are the things that lead up to the fact that then, okay, where it is. And then of course, I would say the other thing built into that is kind of an undercurrent of people like homogeneity. They want to be in this environment. People look like them. So in more cases than not, like having, we want the folks that are sitting on the bench to look like us and be like, have our same lived experience. So we can kind of talk about our same experiences together. And when you don't have like women have different experiences, men with family, and there's just so many of those different things. So I think like, I think the cool thing is that they could be like men like you, for example, who of course already have some diverse background anyway, but you're a man. So it's already kind of set you off a certain mark. Then you are a man who's a person of diverse background. Then you're different and your journey is different. And how did you get access to it? How did you find out just from were you born in Silicon Valley?
No, actually, I was born in Iowa, of all places, right? And I was actually one of the few Asians in Iowa, and so that's a great question. How did I get access to it? I think I was at school and just one of my teachers. So maybe this is part of the answer is one of my teachers was a computer science guy, and he just kind of saw, hey, you seem like you're pretty good at this logic stuff, and he really got me into it.
Yeah.
And then I ended up majoring it and went on from there. So yeah, maybe that's part of the answer.
So maybe like for, people like you and other people that have kind of the coding background, it's like partnering with schools where you bring them, you bring in some of your programs that just like kind of give people an insight into what's possible for them. Because again, I would have never thought to be having my kid in caddying. And not only is he in caddying to get money, he's caddying because there's potential scholarship for a full ride for college. And I have 4 kids. So any full ride is, I'll take any, right? So I think that's the key is just like, how do you open up the eyes of people? How do you provide access to people? How do you make it easier for them to get into it? I think those would be the biggest things.
Right on. Great on the spot answer. That's really unprepared. I just got threw it at you. Like, that's awesome.
Oh, I love it. Well, okay. So then for those who are listening right now, who are probably just like, okay, they might be wanting to be an entrepreneur. They might want to go into franchise. They may just, need a little extra inspiration as leaders in their own right. What would you tell them as maybe a pearl of wisdom or two, just to kind of get them through this rest of this week?
Pearl of wisdom. Wow. I don't know. I think my big thing is, is to try to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's I've been kind of big on that lately. I think human nature is to just do the things that you're comfortable with, and after a while, you just kind of get yourself stuck in a rut. Myself, I think just the human body and the human mind are so amazing in different ways. So like I'm an endurance athlete. I do a lot of running and Ironman and all that stuff, and it's just like your body, when you run 10 miles, your body goes, okay, I can run 11. And your mind is the same thing. I'm an engineer. And so I used to not like talking to people at all. And then once I started into this, teaching kids thing, I forced myself to start talking to parents more and more. I was very uncomfortable with it in the beginning because I was an engineer, right? I just wanted to code. But after a while, you do it more and more, and your mind goes, okay, I get it. You're uncomfortable with that, but now let's make your mind better or more comfortable with it. Right. And so I think a lot of times if you choose something that you're uncomfortable with, you're probably doing less of it than you should. Force yourself to do it, force yourself to do it more, and then you'll get more comfortable with it. And then you're kind of pushing your boundaries out. So that's what I've been big on lately, trying to do.
Well, you're inspiring me. So the focus on service, kind of breaking the mold, helping, other people, this question about kind of thinking about access and how do we kind of diversify and make things a little bit less homogeneous, and thinking about just like the impact we can have in the world. I think that's a big part of the why for the work that you do. I think it's kind of cool. It's very inspirational. So I definitely appreciate you being on here.
Right on. Well, hey, thank you so much. This is a super enjoyable and really valuable. Actually, probably one of the most valuable podcasts I've been on. Actually made me think about a lot of stuff. So I appreciate that.
So good. I appreciate that. And so for those who are listening right now, the ones who are listening right now, I know your head is probably, you're kind of on the wheel like I am, thinking. For those who are listening, please do make sure that you go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, and make sure that you write a 5-star review. Don't forget to share the podcast. That's how we get more and more leaders in the world kind of listening to this, learning, growing, coming up with more ideas that I'm sure you have. So don't be greedy with the knowledge. Go share it. And again, so thanks so much, Hansel, for being on here. Again, a real good pleasure. And I do not regret having you on as a guest. I'm very happy we did.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Heather.
And thanks everybody for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. Be well.